Free? Free things cost the most. Zhou Mingrui silently mumbled and decided that he would not purchase any additional services whatever they were. He would firmly refuse them all. If you are really that capable, try divining that I transmigrated here. With this in mind, Zhou Mingrui followed behind the woman whose face was painted red and yellow, stooping low to enter the low tent. The tent's interior was extremely dark, illuminated only by several beams of light that managed to seep inside. A table covered with paper cards could be made out faintly in the low illumination. The woman with the sharp pointy hat was not affected by this at all. Her long black dress glided as though it was moving over water while she went around to the table. She sat on the opposite side and lighted a candle. The dim yellow light flickered, causing the inside of the tent to appear bright and dark at the same time. It instantly added a much more mysterious feel to the atmosphere. Zhou Mingrui sat down quietly, his gaze sweeping over the tarot cards on the table where he discovered familiar cards like the Magician, the Emperor, the Hanged Man, and Temperance, etc. Could Roselle have been a senior? I wonder if he was also a fellow countryman of mine. Zhou Mingrui mumbled to himself subconsciously. Before he could finish looking at the opened cards on the table, the woman who claimed to have accurate divinations had already reached out her hands to gather all of the cards together. She stacked them into a deck and pushed it in front of him. Shuffle the cards first and cut the deck, the circus fortune teller said in a muted voice. Me? Shuffle? Zhou Mingrui asked reflexively. The yellow and red paint on the fortune teller's face squirmed together as she revealed a slight smile, saying, "Of course, everyone's destiny can only be unraveled by themselves. I only serve as a reader of it." Zhou Mingrui immediately questioned her warily. "This reading does not require additional fees, right? As a keyboard folklorist, I've already seen too many of such tricks." The fortune teller was visibly taken aback before finally saying muffledly, "It's free." Zhou Mingrui, relieved, stuffed the revolver further back into his pocket. Thereafter, he calmly reached out his two hands to shuffle and cut the deck skillfully. "It's done." He placed the already shuffled tarot cards in the middle of the table. The fortune teller clasped the cards with both her hands and carefully looked at cards for a while. Then she suddenly opened her mouth and said, "I'm sorry, I forgot to ask, but what would you like to ask about?" Back when he was wooing his first love, Zhou Mingrui had also done research on tarot cards. He asked unhesitatingly, past, present, and future. This was a type of divination as part of tarot card interpretation. 3 cards, when opened, sequentially symbolized one's past, present, and future. The fortune teller nodded first, then curled her lips to reveal a smile and said, "Then please reshuffle the deck. You can only truly get the cards you want if you know what you would like to ask about." "Were you fooling me just now? Do you have to be this petty? Didn't I only ask a few times if this would be a free service?" Zhou Mingrui's cheeks twitched a little. He took a deep breath and took the tarot deck back to reshuffle and cut it. "There won't be any problems this time, right?" He placed the already cut deck back onto the table. "No problem." The fortune teller reached out her fingers and picked a card from the top of the deck. Then she placed it on the left side of Zhou Mingrui. Her voice was going lower and lower as she spoke. "This card symbolizes your past. This card symbolizes your present." The fortune teller placed the second card right in front of Zhou Mingrui. Then she picked the third card and put it on the right side of Zhou Mingrui. "This card symbolizes the future." "All right, which card would you like to see first?" The fortune teller raised her head up after completing her placement of the cards and gazed deeply at Zhou Mingrui with her grayish-blue eyes. "I'll have a look at the present first," Zhou Mingrui said after giving it some thought. The fortune teller nodded slowly and flipped over the tarot card that was directly in front of Zhou Mingrui. A colorfully dressed character was depicted on this card, wearing ragged headgear with a stick over his shoulder. There was a bindle hanging on the end of the stick and a puppy was following behind him. It was numbered 0. The Fool, the fortune teller lightly read out the name of the card with her grayish-blue eyes affixed on Zhou Mingrui. The Fool? The 0 card of tarot? A start? A fresh beginning with all kinds of possibilities? Zhou Mingrui was not even considered an amateur enthusiast of tarot, so he could only make a rough interpretation based on his own impressions of tarot. Just as the fortune teller was about to say something, the cloth curtains of the tent was suddenly lifted open. The ray of sunlight that shone in was so blinding that it caused the back-facing Zhou Mingrui to instinctively narrow his eyes. Why are you impersonating me again? It's my job to handle the divination for people. A woman's voice growled angrily. Return to your post quickly. You must remember that you're just an animal trainer. An animal trainer? Zhou Mingrui's eyes had already adapted to the light by now. He saw a similar-looking woman who was also wearing a sharp, pointy hat in a black dress, with her face painted in red and yellow as well. The only difference was that she was taller and had a slimmer physique. The woman who was seating in front of him immediately stood up and said disgruntledly, "Don't mind this, it's just that I like doing this. But I have to say, my divination and interpretation can be really accurate sometimes. I'm serious." She spoke and lifted up her dress to go around from the side of the table before quickly trotting away from the tent. "Sir, would you like me to interpret your cards for you?" The real fortune teller looked at Zhou Mingrui and asked with a smile. Zhou Mingrui's lips twitched and asked her sincerely, "Is it free?" "No," the real fortune teller answered. "Then forget it." Zhou Mingrui pulled his hands back and put them into his pockets. He clutched his revolver and money before stooping again to exit the tent. Damn, he actually got an animal trainer to be his fortune teller? Was an animal trainer who didn't want to be a fortune teller not a good clown? Zhou Mingrui very quickly put this matter behind him. He spent 7 pence at the lettuce and meat market for a pound of not-so-great mutton. Then he also bought some tender broad beans, cabbage, onions, potatoes, and other items. Together with the bread that he bought earlier, he spent a total of 25 copper pennies, which converted to 2 soldi and 1 pence. There is really not enough to go around for spending. Per Benson. Not only had Zhou Mingrui spent the 2 notes that he had brought with him, but it was also necessary for him to top it up with the 1 penny he had in his pocket. He just sighed and did not think further about it as he hurried back home. With the staple food, he could now carry out the luck enhancement ritual. After the second-floor tenants gradually left, Zhou Mingrui was still in no hurry to carry out the ritual. Instead, he translated the blessings stemmed from the immortal Lord of Heaven and Earth and related phrases into the ancient Faisak language, as well as the Lone language. He was intending to try the ritual again the next day in those local languages if the original incantation did not take effect. After all, he had to take into consideration the differences between the 2 worlds. In Rome, do as the Romans do. As for translating it into an ancient ritual prayer that used the dedicated Hermes language, Zhou Mingrui had a difficult time completing it due to his lack of vocabulary. After readying everything, he finally took out the 4 loaves of rye bread. He placed one in the corner where the coal stove was originally, one at the bottom inner side of the dress mirror, one at the top of the cupboard where 2 walls met, and one at the right side of the study table where miscellaneous items were kept. With a deep breath, Zhou Mingrui came to the center of the room and spent a few minutes to calm himself. Then he took a solemn step forward and went in a counterclockwise direction in the shape of a square. When he took the first step, he chanted in a low whisper, "Blessings stem from the immortal Lord of Heaven and Earth." The second step, he sincerely chanted, "Blessings stem from the Sky Lord of Heaven and Earth." The third step, Zhou Mingrui breathed out a whisper, "Blessings stem from the exalted Arch of Heaven and Earth." At the fourth step, he spat out a foul breath and meditated in concentration. "Blessings stem from the celestial worthy of heaven and earth." When he returned back to the original spot, Zhou Mingrui closed his eyes and waited in his place for an outcome. He had some anticipation in him, some unease, some hope, and some fear. Could he make it back? Was there going to be any effect? Could there be some unexpected situation? The unknown in front of him was tainted with the crimson light of hope. Zhou Mingrui's thoughts were swirling in his head and was finding it difficult to quell it. It was at this time that he suddenly felt the surrounding air seemed to stop, becoming thick and mysterious. Immediately after, a low whisper could be heard beside his ears that sounded at times real, at times sharp, at times imaginary, at times alluring, at times maniacal, and at times crazy. He clearly did not understand the murmuring that went on. But Zhou Mingrui still couldn't help himself from wanting to listen to it and distinguish what it was saying. His head was in pain again. It was so painful that it felt like someone had stuck a steel drill rod into it. Zhou Mingrui only felt like his head was going to explode. His thoughts were filled with a psychedelic of colors. He knew that something was wrong and tried to open his eyes. However, he wasn't even able to complete such a simple action. His entire body was getting tighter and tighter, and it felt like he could just break apart at any time. At this time, a self-mocking thought came up in Zhou Mingrui's mind. If you didn't seek death, you wouldn't die. He could no longer bear with it. Just as his mind was going to break, the murmuring of voices faded away and his surroundings became very quiet. The mood was an erratic one. It was not only the mood, Zhou Mingrui felt his own body going through the same sensations as well. He tried once more to open his eyes, an extremely easy task this time. A gray fog appeared over his eyes, haziness, vague, and endless. What's with this situation? Zhou Mingrui suddenly looked around him and then lowered his head down to discover that he was floating at the edge of an endless fog. The fog was flowing like water and was dotted with a lot of crimson stars. Some of them were enormous while others were tiny. There was a sense of them being hidden in the deep depths while others floated over the surface of this water-like fog. Looking at the seemingly holographic sight, Zhou Mingrui reached out his right hand in a half-confused, half-exploring manner to try to touch the crimson star that was seemingly floating on the surface. He was trying to find a way to leave this place. When his hand touched the surface of that star, a watermark suddenly appeared from within his body and agitated the stars into a crimson burst. It looked like a dreamlike burning of flames. Zhou Mingrui got a fright from it. He retracted his right hand in a panic but accidentally touched yet another crimson star. As a result, this star burst with splendid light as well. In turn, Zhou Mingrui felt his mind empty and his spirit dissipated. In the Lone Kingdom's capital, Backlund, inside a luxurious-looking villa at the royal district, Audrey Hall sat in front of a dresser. The markings on it were antiquated and there was a cracked bronze mirror on the surface. Mirror, mirror, awaken. In the name of the Hall family, I command you to awaken. She switched between many different sayings, but there was no reaction from the mirror at all. After more than 10 minutes, she finally chose to give up and pouted her lips in grievance. She said in a soft murmur, "Father was indeed lying to me. He always tells me that this mirror was the treasure of the Roman Empire's Dark Emperor and that it is an extraordinary item." Her voice trailed off. The bronze mirror which rested on the dresser suddenly glowed with a crimson light that shrouded her completely. In the Sonia Sea, a three-masted sailboat that looked like an obvious relic was navigating through a storm. Alger Wilson stood on deck, his body undulating with the currents at sea, maintaining his balance easily. He wore a robe embroidered with lightning patterns, and in his hand was a quirky-shaped glass bottle. Bubbles billowed inside the bottle at times, frost turned into snow at times, and signs of gusting wind could be seen at times. "We're still short on the ghost shark's blood," Alger murmured. Then at this moment, a crimson burst appeared in the space between the glass bottle and the surface of his palm. In an instant, it enveloped the surroundings as well. In the fog of gray mist, Audrey Hall regained her sight. She started reckoning the situation in a state of horror and confusion when she noticed the blurry image of a man on the opposite side of her doing the same as well. Immediately after, the both of them discovered another mystery person standing not far from them who was shrouded in a gray mist. The mysterious person was none other than Zhou Mingrui. He was similarly dumbfounded. "Sir, where's this?" Audrey and Alger were startled at first, falling silent in the process. Then they immediately started speaking in unison. "What are you planning on doing?" Not only did they speak the same lone language, they also shared the same grim and tense vibes. "Where am I? What do I plan to do here? I would like to know too." Calming himself down, Zhou Mingrui silently repeated the questions posed by the two. What left the deepest impression on him were neither the sentences formed by words nor the meanings behind them, but the display of bewilderment, vigilance, panic, and reverence by the couple. For some baffling reason, two people had been mysteriously dragged into this world surrounded by gray fog. As the perpetrator, Zhou Mingrui was already feeling abnormally dumbfounded and startled, let alone the couple who was pulled into this mess completely passively. For them, such events and encounters might already be beyond their imaginations, right? Momentarily, Zhou Mingrui thought of two options. The first option was feigning victimhood to hide his true identity and in turn gain a considerable amount of trust. He could then take a wait-and-see approach and take advantage of his circumstances where necessary. The other option was to maintain his mysterious identity in the eyes of the couple. He could then affect the subsequent development while gleaning valuable information from them. Without the luxury of time to deliberate over the situation, he grasped hold of the thought that flashed across his mind. He made an immediate decision to try out the second idea. Exploit the psychological state of the others to gain the greatest advantage for himself. After a few seconds of silence in the fog, Zhou Mingrui chuckled. With a low but not heavy tone, he calmly spoke as though he was replying to the polite greetings from the visitors. An attempt. An attempt? An attempt? Audrey Hall looked at the mysterious guy veiled in the grayish-white fog. And the only thought was that whatever was happening was absurd, funny, horrifying, and weird. She was at the dressing table inside her bedroom only moments ago. But just by turning around, she had come into this place that was filled with gray fog. How inconceivable! Audrey took a breath, revealing an impeccable, courteous smile. She asked in a somewhat perturbed way, "Sir, is the attempt over? Might you permit our return?" Alger Wilson also had the intentions to probe Zhou Mingrui in a similar fashion, but his rich experience made him statelier. He held back his impulse and only took on the role of a silent onlooker. Zhou Mingrui looked at the questioner. Looking through the hazy mist, he could roughly see the silhouette of the person in question. It was a tall girl with smooth blonde hair, but her exact countenance could not be seen clearly. He did not rush to reply the girl's question but turned around to look at the man. He had messy dark blue hair as well as a medium stature that was not considered stout. Zhou Mingrui suddenly realized something. Once he became stronger or had a deeper understanding of the foggy world, perhaps it was possible for him to see through the fog and discern the girl and the man. In this situation, they are the visitors and I'm the master. After changing his mindset, Zhou Mingrui instantly noticed details that he had neglected earlier on. The girl with a melodious voice and the mature, withdrawn man both looked considerably incorporeal. Tainted by a faint crimson red, they resembled a projected image of the two crimson-red stars beyond the gray fog. This projection was based on the connection between the crimson red and himself. An intangible connection that only he himself could realistically grasp hold of. The projection would disappear once the connection was cut. And the couple would then return. Zhou Mingrui nodded mildly and looked at the blonde, chuckling. Of course, if you make a formal request, you can return this very moment. When she did not identify any ill intention from his tone, Audrey heaved a sigh of relief. She believed that since a gentleman who was capable of such miraculous things had given his word, he would definitely abide by it stringently. With her mind somewhat mollified, she surprisingly was in no hurry to request her leave. She rolled her virid eyes left and right, which sparkled with an abnormal radiance. She said in an anxious, anticipative and tempted manner, "This is such a wonderful experience. Yes, I have always been hoping that something like this would happen. I mean, I like mysteries and supernatural miracles. No, my point is, what I mean is that, sir, what can I do to become a beyonder?" She got more excited as she spoke, so much so she was fumbling over her words. The dream that sprouted in her as a result of listening to thrilling fantasies as told by her elders finally saw the possibility of being materialized. However, with just a few words, she had already forgotten all her previous fears and horrors. "Good question. I would also like to know the answer," Zhou Mingrui complained inwardly. He started to ponder on an answer to the question to maintain his unfathomable image. At the same time, he felt that it was quite unbecoming of him to talk while standing. Shouldn't he be in a palace? Sitting at the head of a long table and on a mysterious high-backed chair engraved with ancient patterns while silently observing his visitors? As soon as this thought surfaced, the gray fog started to churn, giving both Audrey and Alger a shock. In an instant, they saw a number of towering stone pillars around them. Above them was a vast dome that encapsulated them. This entire edifice looked magnificent, grand and lofty, just like a legendary palace for giants. Directly under the dome where the gray fog gathered, a long bronze table appeared with 10 high-backed chairs on either side in a symmetrical arrangement. The back of each chair dazzled and shone faintly with crimson red, drawing the outlines of weird constellations that differed from reality. Audrey and Alger sat face to face, sitting next to the seat of honor. The girl looked to her sides and could not help but mumble, "How fascinating." "It is certainly fascinating." Zhou Mingrui extended his right hand and caressed the edge of the bronze table a little while maintaining an unperturbed expression. Alger inspected the surroundings, and after a few seconds of silence, he suddenly opened his mouth and answered Audrey's question in place of Zhou Mingrui. "Are you alone? If you want to become a Beyonder, join the churches of either the Evernight Goddess, the Lord of Storms, or the God of Steam and Machinery. The majority of us will not meet a Beyonder our entire lives. This has caused churches and even some clergies within some of the biggest churches to suspect the same. While this is the case, I am certain to tell you that Beyonders still exist in courts, tribunals, and execution agencies. They are still fighting against the dangers that grow in the dark. Only that their numbers are much fewer as compared to before and during the early days of the Iron Age." Zhou Mingrui listened attentively, but he tried his best to present himself as paying little attention to Alger's words, much like how young kids listen to stories, relying on Klein's fragmented general knowledge of history. Zhou Mingrui knew clearly that the Iron Age referred to the current epoch, which was the fifth epoch that began 1,349 years ago. Audrey silently listened to Alger finish his sentence before sighing. "Mister, I know all about what you just said. I even know more than that, including the Nighthawks, the mandated Punisher, and the machinery hive mind, but I don't want to lose my freedom." Alger gave a low-sounding laugh and said vaguely, "You can't become a Beyonder without sacrifices. If you don't consider joining churches and accepting their given challenges, you can only seek the royal families and the few nobles with family histories of more than 1,000 years. If not, you can rely on your luck to search for clandestine evil organizations." Audrey puffed her cheeks subconsciously and looked around in a fluster. After confirming that both the mysterious man and Audrey did not notice her tick, she pressed, "Are there no other solutions?" Alger sank into silence. About half a minute later, he turned around to look at the mysterious man who was watching the two of them in silence. Realizing that Zhou Mingrui had no plans to make any comment, he looked back at Audrey and said with deliberation, "I have 2 sets of Sequence 9 potion formulas." "Sequence 9? Zhou Mingrui muttered to himself. "Really? Which 2 sets?" Audrey clearly knew what the Sequence 9 potion formulas meant. Alger leaned back slightly and replied unhurriedly, "As you know, humanity can only depend on potions to become real Beyonders, while the names of potions come from the blasphemy slate. After constant translations into Jotun 1, Elvish, Ancient, and Modern Hermes, and Ancient Facesack, they have undergone changes to match the day and age of that era. The essence is not in their names, but whether they portray the core characteristics of the potions. I have a Sequence 9 potion named Sailor. It enables you to have excellent balancing capabilities. Even if you were on a boat in a rainstorm, you will be able to walk about freely as though you were on land. You will also gain immense strength and illusory scales under your skin. They will enable you to swim like a fish and be difficult to catch. You will move agilely underwater just like marine animals. Even without any equipment, you will be able to easily submerge underwater for at least 10 minutes. Sounds great, the Keepers of the Seas from the Lord of Storms? It was called by that name in the past. Alger did not pause and continued. The second set of Sequence 9 potions is called Spectator, although I am not sure what it was called in the past. This set of potions enables you to have an exceptionally sharp mind with acute observational abilities. I believe you can understand by what spectator means from watching operas and plays. Just like an audience. Spectators judge the actors in the secular world, catching a glimpse of the real thoughts of them through their emotions, conduct, and mantras. At this point, Alger emphasized, "You must remember, regardless of whether you are at an extravagant banquet or a crowded street, spectators can only be spectators forever." Audrey's eyes shone as she listened and spoke after a long while. "Why? All right, this is a follow-up question. I think I have fallen in love with this feeling of being a spectator. How can I get this potion's formula? What can I use to trade with you for it?" Alger looked like he was already prepared as he said in a deep voice, "The blood of ghost sharks, at least 100 milliliters of it." Audrey nodded her head excitedly but subsequently asked worriedly, "If I can get it? And I'm saying if how do I hand it to you? How can you promise me that you can give the potion's formula to me in return for the ghost shark's blood, as well as the authenticity of the formula?" Alger said calmly, "I'll give you an address. I'll mail the formula to you or tell you directly here once I receive the blood of the ghost shark. As for promises, I think that both you and I can feel rest assured under the witness of the mysterious sir." As he said this, he swept his eyes towards Zhou Mingrui, who was sitting up straight at the seat of honor. "Sir, the fact that you brought us here shows that you have tremendous strength unimaginable to us. Neither one of us would dare violate a promise with you as witness." "That's right." Audrey's eyes sparkled and agreed with excitement. From her perspective, the mysterious gentleman who had unimaginable abilities was definitely an authoritative witness. How could I or the guy opposite me dare trick him? Audrey half turned her body and looked at Zhou Mingrui earnestly. "Sir, please be the witness of our trade." At that moment, she then realized that she was all too impolite, having forgotten all along to ask a particular question. She asked hurriedly, "Sir, how should we address you?" Alger nodded slightly and echoed the same question in a serious manner. "Sir, how should we address you?" Zhou Mingrui was taken aback. He gently rapped his fingers on the bronze table. The contents of the earlier divination flashed across his mind suddenly. He leaned back, withdrew his right hand, and crossed his 10 fingers, placing them below his chin. He gave the duo a faint smile. "You can address me as." Upon saying this, he paused for a moment. He said amiably and calmly, "The fool."